Welcome. I am going to do a fun walkthrough for us today. I have a little application that I made just for this adventure. For today, we're going to do something that I've helped a lot of people with on individual projects, but I also see a ton of questions about it float across Reddit and TikTok and other places. It is, how do you get your app out of Replit or Bolt or something like that and onto your local machine so you can do some stuff that maybe those applications can't do. For a little context, when Replit or Bolt or Lovable build an app, they get to set up these package files in the first build, and then their access to these files are super limited after that first initial build. If you go to do drastic changes or add significant functionality to an application, you'll find that a lot of times they can't edit these files and you get stuck. You end up in these loops that would be debugged by another application really fast, but because these files aren't editable by, in this case, Replit, in this demo, you'll get stuck. What I'm going to do is show you how to just pull it out of there and set it up on a local machine so you can edit any file you want and basically be able to have full control of your application, deploy it anywhere you want, and we'll get it pulled down. Sound like a plan? Awesome. Thumbs up. All right. Hello to everyone else who joined while I was monologuing there. What we have here is a really basic little CRM. This is one of my favorite stacks here to build with, and it's just a Python backend. Python handles the auth and the backend piece, and the front is Bootstrap. Now, this is not designed fancy in any way. This is basically a 3-prompt app. I sent it into the PRD tool, and it gave me the prompt. I told it I wanted it to be Python and Bootstrap, so it's really fast and easy to use. Then it spit that out. I gave it to Replit, and Replit built it. I had to give it a prompt to build the database because it did in-memory storage to begin with. And then I gave it a prompt to build, to add on one feature, which would be the projects. So initially it just had clients, and then I added projects. And so this is a really, really simple CRM app, but it has a lot of the features that everybody runs into issues with, which are database and auth and multiple different referenced content across database elements. So kind of has like all those basic features in. Those tend to be pieces that people have trouble with when bringing an app down to their machine. I made sure this app had all of those. We'll just do a test client here to show you how the app works on the system here. It's got these default statuses. You can add a new status type if you want, and it goes into the list here. And we'll save this client. Now we have 2 clients, and then we can also create a new project. And we'll grab test client 2. We'll put that in. We'll grab a date for our project. We'll save that here. And then if we want to go into that project, we can add a task to it. So it's a very, very straightforward CRM with simple project management. We will have this here as a medium priority, and it needs to be done tomorrow. Awesome. Okay. So that's how it works. It's very, very simple. Has a database here with our tables, and easy as that. The auth is here. You can create an account or sign in. When you register, it just creates the user and goes in. So not a ton of complexity on the auth side at this point, managed by Python in the backend. All right, that's the app. Let's dive in to getting it ready to pull down to our computer. And if you have questions along the way, drop them in the chat or just say them out loud. I'm listening.
Wouldn't the easiest way just be GitHub?
Yes, we're going to use GitHub. That is exactly correct. But there's a nice little prep step that I like to do here. And this makes it a little easier when you do GitHub. We're going to say this prompt, please look through the application and look at all dependencies and run commands. Excuse me, I forgot build commands, and make me a list of what would be needed to run this locally on my computer. Do not make changes. All right, so this little thing here, Replit or whatever app you're using, Bolt, Lovable, has some pretty good context of what it has built at this point. Asking it this before we do any sort of migration is going to be helpful for setting up your local environment, because every app has different dependencies and you're going to need to have a list of those. Question about any reason I'm using Replit versus Lovable. No real reason, somewhat of a reason. A lot of people that I talk to are using Replit and get stuck with edits and into debug loops that Replit can't solve. So this particular demo is, I guess, to be usable by a lot of that audience. But otherwise, this process is the same for Replit, Lovable, whatever, because we're going to get our documentation and then we're going to send it up to GitHub. And that process is going to be usable in any of the platforms. Tony, you asked about GitHub Desktop. Yes, we will be using GitHub Desktop. All right, so we have our analysis of the application. And realistically, you don't have to really know a ton about what this says. Your next step is, now that it's documented, is to say this. Please write me a run locally MD file. MD is just a Markdown file. That's easy. We use Markdown files because they're common in code, but they're also very easy for the LLMs, the agents, to read. With this info, do not make other changes. We have our run locally MD file. It's right here. Markdown file. You can open it in an editor so you can see Markdown. This is what it looks like. We have our run locally MD. We are going to go over here. All of the apps can connect to GitHub. We're going to go to GitHub here, create a repository. Now that's created. Get this little bitty toast notification here, and then it disappears, and this does not go away, which is a user experience issue that I think Replit should fix at some point. You just have to watch for this little toast notification. Then you can go back over here, you click confirm, and then you push this branch. Now we are on GitHub. Now this has a database, and there are a few ways we can approach this. I'm going to go over the simplest method for this call. If you want to get more advanced, you can migrate the database to a different host, or you can install the database locally using Docker or something like that. For this example, we are just going to connect our local machine to this database since it's already set up using an environment file. Okay? And I'll show you what I mean by that. The next thing you'll do is download GitHub Desktop. It's free. You'll download it for your computer. I have a Mac, so that's why it's showing that. But you can download it on any computer you want. Linux, Windows, Mac, all supported. And then you will also need a local IDE. To recap IDE, this is an integrated development environment right here. It allows you to write code and interact with terminal and your console and run commands all in one integrated panel. And this is a cloud IDE. To run locally, you need a local IDE. And the most common one is VS Code here. And all of the popular options, Cursor, Windsurf, this new Kilo code that I showed everybody on the call last week, they all run on Visual Studio. So this is the underlying IDE that runs underneath all of them. And then they have an agentic plugin on top. My go-to is Windsurf, this one right here. Their pricing is really good, and they give you a lot of token usage for the money. They're prompt-based. It's basically 3 cents a prompt, and then it'll go through as many actions as it can based on the prompt. So you can do a lot of building with their $15 plan, and they have a lot of prompts included for the demo, the trial. Cursor is also really popular. I don't love it as much. I feel like Windsurf works a little bit more smoothly, so that's why I prefer Windsurf. And then my new addiction is Kilo Code. And this thing is awesome because of the orchestrator mode here. You give it a PRD and it goes through and architects the whole thing out, and then it subs out the tasks to different little agents inside the platform and can do really incredible builds that are well documented. So, and it's a fork of Klein and Rue. So it's a very, very solid little platform. We'll use Windsurf for this one though, for this pull down that we're going to do. So you download GitHub, and then you download, in this case, Windsurf, and get signed up there. Our app is already at GitHub here. We go to the next step, which is pull it down locally. And I'm going to switch over to GitHub. I have GitHub Desktop installed, and it's connected to my GitHub account. When you install it, you'll click a button and it just opens up a browser to log into GitHub, and that authorizes the app. I'm going to click here and click Clone Repository, and I'll search for the CRM that we just built right here. We will clone that. I'm going to choose my GitHub repository folder and clone that locally. Just pay attention to where you save it. All right. And we're going to fetch. There we go. So now we have it on our computer. The files are now locally right here. Easy as that to get it onto my computer. And then you switch over to Windsurf or whatever Klein Cursor process is virtually identical right here. And we are going to click this Open Folder option. This is Windsurf. And we're going to go to my GitHub repository and select just the folder that we downloaded. Now here are all of those files that we had in Replit. What it does not have is the database. As it sits right here, they're just static files. They are not compiled and running at the moment. I have 3.7 here. I'm going to take it off of thinking for the moment. Probably don't need thinking for this. We're going to load into context for Windsurf what the app is. Please look at the files in this application. Look at here you can actually tag the file with the @ symbol, and then you can actually bring the file right into context there. See the dependencies. Identify what we need to do to run this app locally, including where our .env file needs to go and what needs to be in it. Do not make changes. Your MD file might be named differently, so take that into account. All right, so this is loading up the app in context. Let's talk about the .env situation. Inside Replit here, you have secrets. And these control your database connection, your session secret. They might have your Stripe key or your OpenAI API key, anything like that. And these are environment variables. And a properly built application will not have the keys anywhere in the code. They will be in these application secrets, and the application will access those on the back end and then provide the results or the data from those to the front end without exposing the keys. And these go, when you're running it locally, you don't have a little secrets window like this. You have an .env file where all of those secrets will exist in your local application. Future pacing here to, if you ever deploy to a different location, you will then copy all the pieces from your .env file into your new hosting platform. I like to host on Railway. It's one of my favorites. And they have secrets there. So you can paste in the .env content and get all of the secrets up to that platform. All of your secrets are saved there and your application will work when deployed. Let's see what it found here. And again, I didn't try this app locally. So you're getting to see exactly how this would work if you did it on a new app. We are debugging a launch and doing a pull down locally together. This isn't pre-prepared other than the app is built. All right, so it says we need to create a .env file in the project root directory with the following variables. And it has this information here. So it says it's asking for a database URL. And it says create the database. There's something I noticed that's a little different here. It says we need to create the database and we need to use database URL and our session secret. Now, looking at these secrets, it's using the database URL here. It's using the session secret. It also has the database, the host, the port, the user, and the password, which all make up the database URL, split out individually. So I'm not entirely positive it's just using the URL and the session secret, but it thinks so from the analysis we did here earlier. We're going to trust that and assume that it's correct on that, but you may have to get the rest of these elements if some piece of the application doesn't work. What we're going to do is create our env file. It said we're going to put it in the root. So you're just going to right click over here. Everybody can see my Windsurf screen, correct? Cool. Tell it new file and just .env right there. Now I notice that there is not a gitignore file here. And this env file is as bold as everything else here in the list. The problem with that is we don't want this env file to be synced to GitHub. And right now it is queued here to go to GitHub. We haven't synced it yet, but it's queued up. The first thing I would do is create that file. And then before you put anything into it, ask your agent to make a gitignore file and make sure that the env file is included. Does not get. All right, so we're going to ask it to make a gitignore file and make sure the env file is included so it does not get pushed to GitHub. Do not make other changes. And I want to show you what that does here for us in the application. So it's going to make this gitignore. That's here. It's not fully made yet. So we'll give it a second to be completed. There we go. So now we have our file. This tells GitHub Desktop what not to send up to GitHub. And you'll notice here now this file is grayed out. This env file is grayed out. And it is no longer in our list to commit. And that's because it has been excluded here on the list so that the env files don't get sent out and our keys and database strings and everything like that don't end up on GitHub. So don't skip that step. Now we're going to go into our env file and paste in our information here. So to get that, you're going to click this edit as env and copy the information that pops up. When you pop it up, it just gives you a plain text file that you can copy and paste. And then you're going to go back to Windsurf and paste that into the env file that you created and do Command or Control S to save it and close that file out. All right. And we will go back to our share. Okay, that is saved. Now, the other thing it told us to do was create this database, and we already have a database. In this case, we have it up at Replit. We're just going to use the one that we created on Replit there. We are going to go back to it and say, okay, the env file is created and has the session secret and database URL. Can you please build and run the app? Now we may run into bugs here, but that's the whole point of this demonstration, is how to get past those. Here's the little prompt. I'm attempting to make these pretty generic as far as the prompts go, because your application may be different. Rather than focusing on specifics for this application, I'm trying to make it really fairly generic. Now this is going to happen on some computers and not on others. It ignored a memory that I have saved in Windsurf that I have Python 3 installed. Here we go. So it's going to set this up for our dependencies. You're just going to walk through these steps. It'll run into little errors. It makes assumptions about what's installed. I think we should just have a requirements file. But let's let it go ahead and get these installed. There are, for this particular application, potentially command shortcuts I could use to get past, since I know what the application was built with. I don't want to skip pieces that you might run into. We're just going to walk through these and just see what errors it runs into here. If you notice, we haven't had to necessarily do an additional prompt here. We're just taking the action. I have mine not set on auto run. You can set it on auto run where it'll just go through these itself. I find that to be not so helpful sometimes. I like to just see what it's actually going to run. So it's going to run the app on port 8000. I have a global rule up here in customizations because I have an application running on port 5000 and it likes to run stuff on port 5000. So I said, that's already busy. I saved it in global rules. So every time I run Windsurf, that's in the global rules. It knows that my application is, that port 5000 is already taken. So that's what it's mentioning here. Okay. This is pretty common when you go to run a Python application. It's just setting it up to load from the env file. You can see here it's added some information. Now I built this with the PRD tool, which generates a changelog instruction. You'll see here that it is making comments at the top so that later on when you come back to your application, it will have all of the changes logged here in each file. So that way you know what's happened and you don't like retry fixes as often. It keeps the AI on track. Okay. Looks like the app is starting up here and it's going to open a browser preview. See if the browser preview works. I'm not sure that the backend is going to listen from this port, but we're going to try to log in and see. It did the right steps. We are connected to the database that we have in Replit. So the user should already exist. We're going to test it and see. Hey, I think we might have an issue here because of the URL that it gave us for the browser preview. So we are going to just try localhost, it said 8000, and just test the login there and see if that's actually the issue or not. Okay, guess it's not that that's the issue. We are going to copy this and give that back. We will say when we log in, this error appears. And just paste it in here. And we're going to give it our comment. Review the code and the issue. Do not make changes. Let's check our console while we're waiting on that. Inspect. No errors. I'm guessing it missed a dependency on the install, or it installed the wrong version. Here we go. Interesting. So it says that it might not have it compiled in this Python library on this computer. So this is an interesting thing that you'll run into from time to time. Let me talk through what's going on here. This application was built by Replit, and large language models are trained on a set of data, and then they stop learning at a certain point. And it's generally a given date. The data they have for building from, unless you provide them with specific version information to use and documentation in your prompts, they're going to use whatever was being used at the time of their training, which in the case of what Replit used was probably a year and a half ago when this model was last trained on documentation. So it'll sometimes pull in and use stuff that isn't exactly current. And then my computer here has Python installed. This is a fairly new computer, so it had Python installed maybe a month ago. It's using a much newer version. So let's take a look here. I would say we're going to take the approach of not overthinking it. What is the simplest approach that will work with the users already in the database? Just tell it we want to keep that existing functionality. We're going to see what it says here. It says it's going to check. It's going to write a little script to check to see if there are users in the database. I know there's one. We have one here. And there is a hashed password. You could potentially stop it before running that and send it a screenshot like this before you run this command right here. Also, I want to show you something. It runs these commands in a background terminal. When I'm doing this, if I don't need to interact with the terminal that it's using for this sort of setup, I will just let it run these commands. I'll click run and run. But sometimes I want to interact with the terminal, or maybe it runs a command and it asks you for like yes, no, or to tab down and select. And if it did this run here in a background terminal, you're not going to be able to interact with that. What you would do in that case is open a new terminal here and copy the command that it has and paste it in here and run it in your terminal so that you can interact with like the yes, no, or scroll through options. Sometimes that's needed for database migrations or things like that. We will run it there instead of running it here. And it came up with an error. So we will just copy that back and paste it in. If it had run that script for us, it would see the error in its own background. All right. Use hashing. See how big this file is. It's not too big. And here it's updating our changelog to log this change. So we have our little changelog here that has all the stuff that's been done on the application. There we go. And let's see if it'll run here. Needs to stop the app and restart it. What I'm doing here, I'm going to test out that new hashing that it created. Generally speaking, because this application doesn't have but one test user, I don't really want to fight with changing versions on my computer just to play with this. I would just attempt the creation of a new user and save that and then see if the new hashing actually works to log in. And it does. We could go into the database and delete the old user and change the username if we wanted. Here's the new hashing method right there that it wrote up. I could change the username here and turn this back into the primary one if it really mattered for the new hashing. But this is an example of a thing that I see people run into. They'll get to a point where their app is completely stuck and maybe they've already put in a ton of information in the database. And if something like this has an incompatibility with their local machine, you'd have to go through the process to install, like in this case, a different version of Python to run the application. But I wanted to go the simplest test here and run this user here. Okay, so now we are operational on local Let's just see if it creates a new client and adds it to the database. We'll make that a lead. We have our lead, and we will go into a new project, and we'll pick a date. I'm going to have a lot of tasks that are due tomorrow in here. I do need to have a client that's called Monty. We should do that. We'll do that. All right. What should we put in the notes? We'll put that in here. And then let's just make sure our tasks are saving as well. View our project here, add a task, name it demo task local, and give it a date. So many things due tomorrow. Okay, let's just check and make sure that that all loaded up into the database. Yep, we can see that here. These are linked to users and projects. The way this is segmented is because this is a new user, it can't see the projects for the other user. We could set up permissions later or something like that. But in the end, we now have our application running locally here and accessing the database that we have on Replit. We can then continue to code everything that we want right here on our local machine. We can sync that all up with GitHub right here and send that back. So now it's backed up in the cloud. So that is how you pull an app down and set it up to run it locally. You can do this with any application, same process. Just use the exact same flow, and it gives you a lot more access to editing. You have a lot more tools available. For example, Replit is stuck on something, or Bolt or Lovable, they all use Claude, pretty much 3.7 or now the new 4 model. You can hop in here, and this is just Windsurf, but you can grab any model you want. There's a ton of them. You can code with Grok if you would like, or DeepSeek. When 3.7 gets stuck, I like to go over to this O3 high reasoning and have it analyze the whole problem and write a document to fix it. But don't do the fix, because O3 tends to get lost in the middle of fixes. It leaves files half done. I'll have it write the document and the steps, and then come back and have 3.7 execute. So it's a fun debug. Do I ever use Gemini? Yes. I tested building a application using 2.5 Pro. It's a Chrome plugin. It did a horrible job. Might have just been a bad day. But then I also used it to debug a React state issue, and it couldn't write the files, but it found the issue, and I was able to give the issue back to Claude to write the fix. It choked on the files for some reason, but it found the issue, and I was able to give that back to Claude for the fix. So hit or miss on Gemini so far. But I will definitely swap through models here on a daily basis and try different stuff and just see, because in a tool like this, let's say we didn't like any of this stuff that we just did here and we wanted to do it over. I can click this revert button and click confirm, and it just undoes all the work that I just did. And then changes those files back. I can resubmit that to GitHub, and now I've backtracked and can go try again. So you can try all sorts of tools because they're all available down here. If you don't like it, just backtrack and go give the same command to a different tool. Similar process in Kilo code, things like that. That's what I do.
Thanks for watching. If you want to see more videos like this, please like and follow. And if you need help building or finishing your app, click the link in my bio to book a one-on-one Zoom call to take a look at your project.